But first, for more on the midterm results, let's welcome National Republican Congressman Committee Vice Chair, Congressman Jodey Arrington, along with GOP pollster Lee Carter. Good to see you both. Congressman, I'm going to start with you first on your 1,000-foot view of how the night went last night based on the results that we have so far. We are waiting on those two key Senate races and more information to come in. It wasn't necessarily this red tsunami, but it wasn't that bad either.
Well, no, it was a red wave in pockets of the country, and I think your viewers are familiar with those. Where we were competing in marginally Democrat districts, we won them. We all wish we would have done better. I don't think there's a Republican out there that would say differently, but this is the first time we've won back the House, Republicans anyway, in control of the U.S. House since 1954. We've got the power of the purse now. It's a 50% plus one proposition for the majority in the House. And if you've got that, then you control the agenda. You can provide oversight as a check against an activist and overreaching administration, a lawless administration, possibly one that weaponizes institutions of democracy. So there's a lot of positive things. At the end of the day, we're going to be in the majority. We've flipped a dozen seats so far in places like Oregon, in New England, and throughout the country. So it's going to be a positive night. The expectations were high. The polls were way off, but Republicans are going to have the majority, Jackie.
Lee, some of those key races were very, very close. Of course, we looked at Florida, the governor's race there, and it was a landslide for DeSantis, but the rest of the races weren't. And what that says to me is that the nation is still very polarized. And as we were going into this, we said inflation and crime. Those are, polling as the issues that are on top of mind for voters. I think those are really important issues still. But having said that, did the Republicans underestimate the folks that were looking at abortion as their top issue? This notion of, the death of democracy, climate change. It seemed that those people turned out.
Well, I think there's no question about it. There was some underestimating of the turnout on the Democrats. I mean, 27% of voters said that abortion weighed heavily into their decision. And I think that many Republicans weren't expecting that to be the case. The other thing, though, is we did have a lot of voters in the studio last night for election night. We were talking to them about why they felt the way they did. Many of them, everyone in the room, inflation was a top concern. About half of them felt it was a global issue that nobody could do anything about here in the U.S. And many of them also felt like the Republicans didn't make a case on what they were going to do about it. They talked about how bad it was, but they didn't say this is what we're going to do to address it. Similarly with crime, there was a lot of conversation about how bad it was. People weren't sure exactly what Republicans were going to do about it. Now, about a month ago, there was the Commitment to America, which was announced, and I think we saw some momentum shift, and we thought that was going to get picked up. I think it was a little bit too late. The momentum didn't shift soon enough. And I think there was an underestimate about the enthusiasm around the women's reproductive issues.
Yeah, and those are all great points. And Lee, you did a fantastic job last night. I was watching. Congressman, if I can come back to you on one of the points that Lee made, which is this notion of inflation, people feeling that it's a global problem, not necessarily one created here. Another school of thought is, well, we definitely didn't make anything better when we spent $4 trillion in roughly 18 months. You talk about the House and being able to block legislation from moving forward is one of the things that the Republicans will do, say no more spending. We are not approving any more of these reckless bills. Absolutely. That's the first thing we should do and that we have control over with the power of the purse. Stop the spend. We have this president who claims to reduce the deficits was the one who had a record of $3 trillion in deficits in 21. Of course, that's going to come down. Now he's claiming he's reduced the deficit. The deficits in 2022 were higher than pre-COVID, and we're going to have over $2 trillion in deficits. This on top of $5 trillion in deficit spending over the last 2 years by this president. So, yes, getting control of spending that has driven inflation, that is bankrupting the country,
and robbing our children of their future in this country, it should be the #1 priority of this new Republican majority in the House.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Maybe there were voters that were unclear about that because Biden even today said we have reduced the deficit by $1.7 trillion off of that pandemic peak. People don't really understand exactly what that means, and they don't understand how his spending contributed to the problem. He also says reducing the deficit is going to reduce inflation, but it's not going to do it in that way. And so sometimes these comments can be a little frustrating. And speaking of that speech, Lee, there was a lot to unpack in there, but there was one particular soundbite where he talked about young voters. Let's listen to it and react on the other side.
And I especially want to thank the young people of this nation who, I'm told, I haven't seen the numbers, voted historic numbers again, and just as they did 2 years ago. They voted to continue addressing the climate crisis, gun violence, their personal rights and freedoms, and the student debt relief.
Pretty progressive issues for the young voters, Lee, but the student debt relief is what caught my attention there. And everybody said that was a last-ditch effort to try to buy some votes, and it seems that it's worked. And I'm wondering if the Republicans can do something to appeal to the young voters without, recklessly forgiving debt.
Yeah, I would really like to dig into that and understand what it was, because we did have about 4 college-age voters who were in the room last night. None of them really talked about student loan forgiveness. What they did talk about was women's reproductive issues, which were really, really important to them. And they also talked about the importance of democracy and really being able to be who you were. And I think that sort of spoke to them more than the debt forgiveness. Now, I really want to dig in and look at some exit polling by that demographic. I'm not so sure that it was student loan at all, as much as it was people got out to vote for women's reproductive issues, especially those younger folks. I talked to a lot of college students about this very issue, and many who were Republican voted Democrat because of this issue alone.
Wow. Okay. So there's a lot of data to break down and possibly some learning lessons here as well. Congressman, great to see you tonight. Lee Carter, good to see you as always.